One. Okay, we just started recording. My name is Mitchell Murdoch. This is for my world music class. And listening to me right now is my wife, Lindsay Murdoch. And today, I'm just going to be presenting on Mongolian and Tuvan throat singing. I've been interested in Mongolia for a little bit now. My cousin served a mission there, an LDS mission. And I'm just setting a stopwatch here so I can make sure everything's good. And I've just always been fascinated with their culture and with how they're nomadic and they're just really cool. And so when I looked up what kind of musical styles they had, this was one of the first things that popped up. And it sounded really interesting to me and like nothing I'd really heard before. So you ready, Lindsay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. I hope you'll find this interesting. So to start, we're going to start with the history of the region. So kind of pre-330 AD, Mongolia didn't have a whole lot going besides just a lot of khanates, which are like different clans, different peoples going through the area, just being nomads, raising a lot of sheep, raising a lot of horses. And that went up in 330 to 555 AD. This was going on for a while, all the way up until 1206 AD. This is where Genghis Khan, at the time, his name was Temujin. Temujin was a man who had a lot of ambition. He started off just as a really simple nomad hunter kind of guy. And through a lot of different kinds of familial ties and wars and successions, he was able to become the empire of all of the Mongolian area at the time. And from that little area, he was able to make a giant empire. And this empire would be the second largest empire the world's ever seen. And that's right behind the British Empire, which was like hundreds of years after this Mongolian empire. And Genghis Khan, as he became known afterwards, he was a very famous figure in Mongolia. And he has, if you go to Mongolia, you'll see lots of different kind of images of him, different references to Genghis Khan. The airport that you go to in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital, it's named after him. It's the Genghis Khan International Airport. He's on all of their money. They have a huge giant statue of him clear out there. This is it, just outside of Ulaanbaatar. So once Genghis Khan died, the empire went on for a little while, but it was split into four different areas called the Khanates, where each area was again ruled by a Khan. It kind of went back to the old style, but it's still a huge empire. And then by 1368, all of those fall and they're kind of absorbed by different empires. A huge one is the Chinese Qing dynasty. Um, so it's still Mongolia, but China just kind of absorbed it into their own little kingdom that they had. And in 1644, all the way to 1911, so a huge amount of time, they were ruled by the Chinese Qing dynasty. And then in 1911, Mongolia declares its own independence. And then by 1991, they become a democratic country. So from 1911 all the way through, like in World War I, they actually teamed up with the Soviet Union. And so they were part of that kind of communist bloc for a little bit until they decided to become a democratic country, which they are to this day. And they actually, for a little bit, when things were getting kind of dicey between China and Russia, they acted as like a barrier between the two countries so that they could broker peace and help calm things down. And that's kind of how they've always been ever since they become a democratic country. Yep. All right. So moving on. There we go. That beautiful giant statue. It's a huge statue, by the way, of Genghis Khan. Now, to talk about the flag. So the music style that I chose, the throat singing, is very common in both Mongolia and in the Tuvan Republic, which is a republic. It's like a republic state in Russia. It's called Tuva. I think it's actually called Taiva now, but I've heard it pronounced both ways. So to start with the Mongolian flag, as you can see, they are red, blue, and red over here. This big yellow symbol here is called the Sayombo symbol. And this has been a very common symbol, especially right here. Can you see my mouse at all? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right here, the very top with the crescent moon, the sun, and a flame. All of this depicts a lot of eternity. They have an eternal flame. The sun is an eternal object, and the moon is also considered an eternal object. And it just represents how Mongolia is an eternal empire that will never fade away. And the rest of it, these two, the yin yang, it represents male and female, as well as just different opposing sides in the universe. It's very common in Buddhist and different ideologies and religions like that. And this whole thing just symbolizes a very solid and unified Mongolian empire that lasts for eternity. The red is for an eternal thriving. They're very industrious and thriving people. And then the blue is for the eternal blue sky, which Mongolia is very famous for its very blue sky. They sit right in the middle of a huge weather phenomenon that keeps the sky blue and clear of clouds for most of the year. They really don't get a lot of rainfall. And so they have a really blue sky. And the same is with the Tuvan flag. The blue is the nomadic herdsman in the sky, is what it represents. The white, it represents silver and virtue. The yellow, it represents gold and just Buddhism, which is very common practice in Tuva, in the Republic. And the blue lines right here represents a river that flows right next to the capital city of Chiksu. So moving on. Here's a map. So Tuva, if you look right here in Mongolia, sits right beneath Russia, which is all this green up here. And then China is also down here. I'll show you a little later. But Tuva sits right here. And in this area, the throat singing is very common. And the Tuvan people are very similar to Mongolian people, except instead of speaking Mongolian, they speak a Turkic language. So it's a little different. They're very similar people, very nomadic. They have a lot of the same customs and celebrations, but they just speak a different language. It's kind of interesting. And then here we see a map of Mongolia. Ulaanbaatar is right here in the kind of the somewhat central part of the country. And then the Tuvan would have been right up around here. So this area up here is where a lot of the nomadic stuff is going on, and the throat singing stuff as well. So the type of food that they eat is really interesting. The first one to talk about is arul. And arul is a curdled goat and sheep milk it's curdled so much that it's become like an edible cracker that they like to eat with a lot of different things. Ayag is also goat's milk, but it's not curdled. Instead, it's fermented. And this is a very popular drink there. It's almost like a tea would be like in India or Britain. So instead of a tea, it's fermented goat's milk. Kind of interesting. And korhog is a baked meat. They eat a lot of baked meats, a lot of this kind of really rich in protein and fat stuff. It's baked sheep meat, baked goat meat, all sorts of stuff like that. And then they have bulldog, which is, if you've ever heard of like a Scottish like haggis, which is like a sheep stomach kind of thing. It's where they take the stomach and they put a lot of stuff in it. We would probably think it's really gross, but to them it's a very delicious meal. That's really good. And then they have a booz, which is a dumpling, like a Chinese dumpling, but it's very specific just to Mongolia. Again, high in protein, high in carbs, high protein, high carb diet for these guys because they're nomads. They burn a lot of it as they are doing their nomad stuff. And then to celebrate the new year, they kind of take all this food and all this decadent stuff, and they have a celebration called the Sagan Sar, which is the Mongolian New Year. So moving on to more customs and celebrations, this right here is a yurt. And yurts are what the nomadic people have used for very many generations to kind of quickly set up and take down as they make their camp. They have huge nomadic tribes and camps that move across the country, and they commonly use a yurt, which is just their house that they can move. And this right here is a nomad, as you can see, is on a horse. The horse is very important to Mongolia. They've been training them for many, many generations and years. And but as you can see, in modern days, they still have a motorcycle back there. But horses are still so very, very important. Mongolia is home to one of the only. It's home to the only breed of wild horse that's left in the world, which has, I believe, one extra chromosome compared to our other modern domesticated horses. So that's kind of what differentiates them. And also, they're just not domesticated. They're like deer, just roaming around out there. They also, a large portion, a majority of the country are Buddhist, with a small portion being Muslim. Most of them are Buddhist, though. This is a Mongolian Buddhist shrine. And something that's very interesting is that a lot of the people, especially nomadic people, have combined Buddhism with an old, very ancient form of shamanism, and they've kind of put it together into their own unique Mongolian religion. And every year they have what's called Nadam, which is a lot like an Olympics or like a Scottish Highland Games, except that it's all Mongolian, and they focus a lot on things like horse riding, on archery, but the biggest one is the wrestling, which is as you can see here. And their style of wrestling is very different than like Greco-Roman or any of the kind of wrestlings we have, because it's just no holds barred. You can do whatever you want. And yeah, they have these special uniforms as well, where they'll be bare chested and they wear briefs, and only men can compete. Because the uniform, there's a legend that a woman competed once, and she actually beat all the men there. And to celebrate at the end of her winning, she actually tore her blouse that she was wearing, and she revealed that she was a woman, she had breasts. And so to make sure that never happened again, they wear this uniform to say like, no, look, see, we're all men. So it's kind of an interesting custom. Okay, now to get right into kume is the throat singing. Kume uses a morin kur to accompany it. It's kind of like it's this right here. This is a morin kur. It's it's sort of like a very, very old predecessor of the violin. Being a violinist myself, I looked into the history of it, and we can kind of trace where violins came from all the way back to this instrument. Which just kind of made its way into Europe as the Mongolian tribes kind of spread across everywhere, until eventually we got cellos and basses and violas and violins. It all came from the Morin Kur. So Kume has a very distinct double voice sound where you hear it and it kind of makes an eerie whistling sound sometimes. There's a lot of different styles. And let's see, I don't think I can quite, let's see. If I just look this up real quick, copy that. Okay, actually, I'm going to show this in a second. So, onto the video here.
I don't think it got copied into the.
No, I'm not showing that one. I'm showing a different one. So, let's see.
Sorry.
Present that. You're good. Okay, I'm going to show this one instead. I think it's a little more interesting. So what we're going to see here is just a performance of kume. So right here is the morning katar that he's playing. And most of their songs kind of start off with this really long drone sound that comes from deep in your throat and in your diaphragm at the same time. And also, I like this video just because there's like this cute grandma that's just kind of sitting there like, yes, this is very nice. My grandson is very good. Anyway, I'm going to move forward a little bit. So yeah, you hear that kind of drone, but then they also have a lot of melodies that can go along with it. So it makes kind of an interesting, I think, very unique kind of sound. And then you can also get a little bit higher registers, but still sounding like a deep kind of baritone sound as well. All right, so that's kind of a more traditional style, traditional classic style that they've been doing for generations. But these days, there's actually a band called The Who, which it's not an old like 80s rock band. Instead, it's a modern rock band that they're pretty cool. They've actually been able to work on some projects with like the Star Wars universe for a video game, where they do the music in like a Star Wars language. This is one of their kind of, it's a different song, one of their own original songs. Let's see if I can get there. And I think they take a lot of inspiration from like hard rock and kind of almost screamo. I think that the style of like throat singing really skipped, like it's kind of fits with the screamo hard rock style. So it really blends into the modern music pretty well. And they have like electric motan guitars. It's like kind of cool. So they kind of make that more of a melody. Yeah. All right, and then one last video to kind of wrap this up. Let's see. This guy here, he's going to teach us how to actually make, how to do the throat singing. So let's go there. And now, Lindsay, this is where I'm going to ask you to participate.
Okay.
So we are kind of running out of time, but he has 3 easy steps.
Step number 2.
Oh, that's step number 2.
Should be wrong.
So step 1, you start down in your diaphragm.
Your chest shouldn't expand, but your belly should expand when you're breathing. So basically, you'll be breathing like it should be wrong, but you have to be breathing like just right.
From your stomach.
How to breathe from your diaphragm. First, lie down on the ground or on your bed.
We're going to skip that.
Number 2, which is finding the golden vibration.
So he's got this thing called the golden vibration.
Yeah. So the golden vibration is something that most of you probably have.
So what he's going to say here, it's when you have a long day and you sit down to relax and you go, like that. You're just exasperated. So you go, can you do that? There you go. And you hear that kind of vibration in the back of your throat. That's alongside your. So it's, breathe into your diaphragm, breathe out, like stick your belly out. Okay, so now the third step that he says, and we are running a little out of time. So third step is you just make a vowel sound. So you go o, e, a, e, all those while you're doing the exasperated. So can you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do you hear it like in the back, but it's also like the front of your mouth is making it. So yeah, well there you go. If you practice that, you too can be an expert kotae singer. So,
Awesome.
all right, thank you so much. These here are my sources. I think I need to move this so you can see them all. But thank you so much, Lindsay, and everybody else who is listening to this, because I'm recording and we'll upload it. But there you go. That's Mongolia and Mongolian throat singing. Hope you enjoyed it. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Oh, you know what? I'm going to